Welcome to our webinar, which is entitled Payroll Outsourcing Strategic or Tactical. My name is Peter Banks and I'm the founder and MD of the Thehrdirector publication. We are a strategic HR resource for senior people leaders in print, person and online. Delighted to partner with HR and payroll specialist SD Worx today. So thank you to them. And in this webinar, we're going to discuss and consider whether payroll outsourcing is a strategic or tactical decision. So just some brief housekeeping, 1 hour for the session. We're running a few polls today, which we'd like you to sort of take part in. They will appear. So on here, you've got your Q&A at the top, which is the little speech bubbles at the top with the little question mark in. So if you click on that one, that basically is a Q&A, so you can actually, there'll be a link posted and you can click on it and there's multiple choice ones. So we'd love you to take part in those, that'd be great. Questions, we kind of want questions throughout, so if you've got questions, please do pop them in. Again, do them via the Q&A. We'll try and get through as many as we can, as we want to get as much info to you as we can. And any we can't do, we'll cover off at the end. And if we struggle even to get those in, we will come back to you at the end of the session, so don't worry. Recording, obviously it's all recorded, so we can get you that back after the event and useful links, etc. So let's get underway today. I think we've had one panel member, I think we're just trying to bring in, but let's get underway. So today our panel joining us today is Jane Earnshaw. Jane is the Senior Director Reward and Policy People Team at ASDA. Wendy Doherty, who is the People Director of Bestway Retail. Mandy Hawley, who is Enterprise Sales Director from SD Worx. And Chris Kirby, Senior HR Manager, HR Transformation at Lace Partners. So welcome all, and I think what would be useful is to sort of find out a little bit more about you. I know we're trying to get Wendy in at the moment, so let's persevere with that. So Jane, if I could come to you first, and just let us all know really a little bit about you, your role, your organisation. Employee numbers would be good as well, and a little bit about, you know, just your present payroll function status, really, I guess.
Okay, yeah, thanks very much, Peter. Yeah, I'm from ASDA, so I have been at ASDA for 25 years. Still quite believe that when I say it out loud. So I've spent the last 19 years in HR, and since 2012 have led the reward team here at ASDA. We currently have approximately 145,000 colleagues, so a lot of people to pay every 4 weeks. We have I've had a long-standing relationship with SD Worx, and we outsourced our payroll back in 1996, so just after I had actually joined the business. And you know, that was a big strategic. It was a strategic decision, but we can go into that further as time goes on as a business at the time. So yeah, I think you probably all know ASDA. We have about 650 shops across the whole of the UK. And as you can imagine, the last 12 months has been quite a learning curve for us as a business. Thanks very much, Peter.
Lovely. Thank you, Jane. We'll come back. So Mandy, if I can come to you next, again, just give us an intro on you.
Yeah, morning everybody. My name's Mandy Hawley and I'm the Channel and Partnership Director for UK and Ireland at SD Worx. A bit similar to Jane, sort of I've been at SD Worx for 20 years, also can't quite believe where that time's gone. And I've always spent all of that time sort of working with our existing clients and new clients to maximise their HR and payroll delivery models, look at delivering transformation, realising return on investment. And in my current role, looking a bit more towards how our partner ecosystem can work to support our existing client needs and look to the future as to what might be on the horizon for HR and payroll.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mandy. That's great. And finally, last but not least, Chris, could you give us a little flavour of your role with Lace Partners?
Yeah, of course. My maybe a bit of brief background on my background. My background is indeed payroll. I had about 15 years of operational payroll experience, culminating in the global head of payroll role at Barclays, and that really gave me, especially on this topic, a really good insight into the insourced versus outsourced model. because Barclays had both. I've been consulting for around 6 years, working across different HR transformation projects and initiatives, and just recently joined Lace Partners. We're a boutique HR consultancy supporting companies in transforming their HR and people function.
Brilliant, thank you, Chris. That's terrific. So we will try and get Wendy in. I know in the background we're trying to work in to get Wendy back in from Bestway Retail. So really keen to do that. So we'll make sure we can try and do that. A few technical problems. So okay, so let's sort of move on then. Let's start off with our first sort of question. And actually, I'm going to start with you, Chris, actually, because you know, these have been some incredibly challenging times for us all, as we all know. And really coming to you as an industry expert, and I think in light of the pandemic, I wanted to ask, do you think attitudes towards outsourcing payroll have changed, and kind of if so, why?
I think that's a really good question, Peter. I think probably yes, and I think we have to go back to what it is that did change and what we have encountered over the last particularly 18 months to 2 years. Whether it be the furlough schemes and the administrative and legislative overheads and burdens, if you like, of those, and also things like the shift to focusing on employee well-being. And I think there's also been a lot of reliance on data, and a lot of that data is obviously held mastered in payroll. And I think generally the perception and the way that businesses have been using payroll functions has changed, and I think that the perception therefore has changed in terms of the old cliche around it's not just hitting a big button once a month. And I think as in supporting those issues and those initiatives over the last sort of 18 months, companies have started to question whether they want the burden, if you like, of the admin, the legislative focus within their on-premise teams, and actually started to look at what else those internal resources can support.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Chris. And Mandy, if I can come to you quickly as well. So again, from your point of view, from you know, your clients, your new clients, I mean, what sort of
I mean, I think, as Chris said, I think the whole attitude towards payroll has changed. In light of the pandemic, I think that payroll has raised its profile. And Chris, you mentioned the furlough scheme. I remember reading a stat that I think 9.6 million people were on the furlough scheme by the 15th of November. So to actually execute that within payroll, of course, raised the profile of payroll. And that in turn has raised different questions around, is it right to keep that payroll and that expertise in-house or to outsource? So I think there's a lot of questions there. I think also sort of touching on technology from a payroll perspective, overnight payroll departments were required to effectively work from home, traditionally not a department which supported home working or really worked in that environment. So I think technology from a payroll perspective has also sort of had to catch up and speed up massively in the last 18 months. And different sectors have different challenges. Sort of Jane and sort of Wendy, when she gets on, also key workers during the pandemic. So different challenges that brought for those industries versus the likes of hospitality, where overnight they had to furlough all of their employees and had different challenges of their employees not being in. So I think sort of all of those things in terms of economy, business changes, and as they're sort of as businesses get back to work, and there are changes, acquisitions, divestitures, think that the high street will never be the same again. So all those things I think will have a massive impact on not just payroll, but payroll technology and the way people operate payroll.
Thanks, Mandy. Yeah, I mean, again, I think we're going to touch on this later, but complexity is such a you know, a key word at the moment. Let's move to Jane then. Jane is our HR practitioners, really, who's, you know, responsible. I think you mentioned 145,000 employees responsibility to pay each month. My goodness me. So just share with us, I guess, some of the key challenges throughout the pandemic that you've experienced.
Yeah, I mean, the overnight challenge we had back in the beginning of March last year was the sudden rise in absence through our shops and in our depots, which actually meant we had to, and then we had the news that we were as a country we were going to shield you know, there's certain vulnerable groups of people, which for us, with our absence and our shielding, meant that we lost 23,000 colleagues literally within a week. So recruiting temporary colleagues into that space and then being able to get them onto our HR systems and then feeding through to our payroll systems and ensuring all those people got paid accurately and on time was a mammoth task for not only us in ASDA, but with our partners at SD Worx as well. It created an incredible funnel of work that happened overnight, and everything that Mandy's just said, we had everyone working from home. SD Worx had everybody working from home, and being able to then, you know, really ensure that nothing was dropped. I'd say that was one of our biggest challenges, and understanding the very quick change in legislation. So, you know, sick pay legislation changed, holiday rollover legislation changed. There was lots to consider very quickly, and as I say, happened within a week in last March.
Yeah, thanks. I think it was the speed, wasn't it, which called us all out somewhat, and I think you're quite right, that complexity. Mandy, just coming to you if I could. So I guess let's just break it down slightly. So what can you actually what elements?
Yeah, I mean, realistically, you can outsource as much or as little as you like. I think sort of if you look at it from a tactical perspective, there are different administrative functions, there are different processes, and there's a potential to look at sort of however much or little you want to outsource. I think sort of it's more really for me about looking at the reasons for outsourcing and what you want to achieve. So been speaking to sort of clients who are outsourcing, certainly for the first time, there's usually a bigger driver rather than a specific process or administrative function, sort of like risk or expertise. I mean, we mentioned sort of the overnight necessity to be able to keep up with that ever-changing knowledge and legislation. I think sort of the speed of legislation and the speed of technology change have never been more so than they are. So they're two that we see that people want to look to outsource for. And then I think sort of there are other things in there, sort of regional, or if people are looking to consolidate different regions, sometimes putting in a new HR system that then requires different integration, different feeds. I think for me, it's more around what elements of your business are you trying to outsource and what business challenges are you trying to address with those elements of outsourcing, rather than the actual sort of specific practices. I mean, there are certain things you definitely can't outsource. So I would say, so if you can't outsource discretionary practices, so if there are practices that go on in a payroll department where a certain person makes a decision outside of process, of course we can always act on instruction, and we are part of the teams and work within an HR shared service environment, but sort of that tacit knowledge and discretionary practice are quite hard to outsource. And one of the other things that we do find, and sort of be interested in other people's feedback, is if you're looking to outsource a problem, we need to discuss what that problem is, because sometimes you do just actually outsource the problem and somebody else manages that problem. That's not necessarily going to fix an issue. So it's about working with your outsourced provider as to how you actually drive positive change, and then get the realistic outputs and outcomes from that, and carry on driving that through sort of 20 years of relationship, because those things will change as the businesses change.
Yeah, thanks, Mandy. I think obviously a 20-year relationship, that's quite something with us, that actually. So Jane, coming back to you then, so do you think, I guess, having your payroll function outsourced, you know, during the pandemic, I mean, I'll ask you sort of, was it a help or hindrance? You know, I'm quite intrigued to see. Yeah,
I think from our point of view, it was definitely a help. To Mandy's point, the problems were a joint problem. So it was actually us able to work together to solve some of those. You know, we knew that our data was not of the quality that we would normally hope it was, due to the fact that we'd recruited over 23,000 people in such a short space of time. But we could work with SD Worx because they knew we didn't hide our problems. We didn't just hand them our problem. We worked together. So I personally think, yeah, having more people involved, not just it being us internally looking at it, but actually having other people we could bounce ideas off, get solutions and act quickly, definitely I think helped us during the first phase of the pandemic.
Terrific. Okay. Again, don't forget, if there's any questions you've got, please do just pop them on the Q&A and we can ask our panel for you. So anytime, that's fine. Well, let's have a look at our first poll then, shall we? So we're going to post a link on the Q&A, which you should be able to click on. It'll take you to your web browser and you can make a choice, multiple choice questions. So you'll see on screen there the question. So is outsourcing payroll a strategic or tactical decision? So we're sort of right on the title of the webinar, really. Choices A, it's a tactical move. Businesses do it to lighten the admin and not to worry about tech and risk. B, it's a strategic move. Businesses do it to improve the ROI of their payroll function. Or C, it's a mixture of both tactical and strategic, or D, unsure. So hopefully you've got that link. If that's been posted, just click to, I think it's in new published, and then click on there and we will be able to feed that back in a moment. So let's see what you make of that first poll. So hopefully that's all working fine. Okay. So let's come back. So whilst we're waiting for those sort of to come back in, Mandy, again, coming back to you. So let's ask that question. Is outsourcing payroll a tactical or strategic decision, and how do you differentiate between the two then?
Personally, I'm not sure you can differentiate between the two totally. And I don't think they're also mutually exclusive. I think there's usually an element of both. I mean, we did a survey actually at SD Worx of 3,000 organisations as to the key reasons to outsource, and the top two that came out were reduce admin and increase quality, which would give an impression that that's their tactical elements to outsource. But I think it's also important to look at the wider decision as to why the company is outsourcing and how that fits in strategically with their HR department, with the rest of the business, with the culture of the business as well. Culturally, outsourcing isn't right for some organisations at certain points during their evolution and their journey. And I think sort of from an outsourced perspective, and we also have clients that don't outsource and just take technology as well. And sometimes that flexibility is actually key to the strategic decision to outsource actually. But I think sort of as an outsourcer, I think one of the main things I would always say to clients is try and share as much of that strategy with your outsourcer, as well as focusing on the tactical KPIs, SLAs, which are really important from an outsourced arrangement. But then as an outsourcer, we can focus during the implementation and during the service delivery to meet strategic objectives as well as tactical objectives. And I think sort of both can change as well over time. The strategy of a business can change over time. Also, so can the tactical reasons to outsource. We quite often see in the first 6, 12, 18 months, we might have different KPIs and SLAs in place to bed in the service, to get some things fixed, to get up and running. I mean, I know if Wendy sort of was on, and I worked very closely with Wendy when they outsourced the payroll for Bestway, they had both things going on at once. So they had a couple of different ways of delivering payroll in a couple of different areas of their business. One was very tactical. The platform that it was running on was coming to the end of its life and that had to move. But they also then had some strategic objectives in terms of employee experience and maximising technology investments of an outsourced of a payroll company. So again, sort of understanding some of those from an outsourced perspective helps us to shape that relationship and make it much more successful.
Yeah, Mandy. So really, the more you know, the earlier you know about what actually an organisation is trying to achieve is what's key here, isn't it? I think, as you say, it can be much part of a much wider sort of org transformation strategy. So, Chris, just as an independent, again, advisor here, again, what sort of things, again, would you agree? Just give us a flavour of your thoughts.
Yeah, to be honest, I couldn't agree more with pretty much everything Mandy said. I think the core is really to get to what is it that you're trying to change or what is it you're trying to fix. I think one thing that we see very frequently is, my payroll's broken. And that's because there's errors coming out. That's because KPIs aren't being met, or SLAs are slipping, etc. And when you actually lift the lid, there could be a much wider issue, and the payroll may just be the symptom of a much bigger issue. So I would always side on the edge of strategic with no extra sort of context, but I certainly think that decision needs to be made sort of fully educated with a broader picture in mind around what is the issue you're trying to resolve and where is that actually sitting.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Just checking any questions, nothing at the moment. So let's have a look at the poll results there then. So is outsourcing and payroll a strategic or tactical decision? And really, what have we got? 11% is tactical, 67% is a mixture of both, and 22% unsure. So yeah, it's any surprises there, panel? Anyone like to sort of offer any sort of response to that? Certainly a mix.
Yeah, surprised you didn't mention number 2, strategic. Was it 0?
Zero. Yeah, 0.
Yeah, I'm quite that's a surprise to me. I would have thought it would be more evenly spread, personally. Yeah.
So again, I guess this is why talking today is quite an interesting, viewpoint to really understand the strategic part of this. So, okay, let's move on. So let's move on to kind of myths about outsourcing out there. I know, things like we hear losing control, time and cost of training staff, and implementation times, integration, perceived risk. So these are all things. So, are they a myth? Are they real? So Jane, I guess from coming with your experience here. So, what's your experience of those myths, and what's the reality?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to remember. I don't know if Mandy does either. Going back to 1996, I wasn't involved at the start of the outsourcing relationship. How I can say is I certainly don't feel a loss of control from my perspective. How I've always viewed it is a joint relationship. It is really important to think about your outsourcer as an extension of your own team, and I think if you think of it like that, it works well, and you will have bumps in the road between any sort of relationship. But however, actually, I never feel a lack of control. We have a very clear communication between the ASDA team and the SD Worx team, and that can be at a leadership level or a tactical operational level as well, constantly. So keeping ensuring that we've got a good flow of information communication between the two, I think is ideal. I can honestly say it does not feel like you have lost control at all. In fact, in some ways you've got more, because I just feel you've got knowledge from the industry experts to hand, which is something you don't always get if you have a small in-house team. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Wendy. And just a question, actually. So probably for Mandy and Chris, I wonder. So how can we future-proof payroll operations? Is the question we've had in. So Mandy, care to?
Yeah, I mean, I would say sort of that is key to one of the reasons that people outsource. So from a payroll operational perspective, as Jane mentioned, one of the things you are outsourcing is the knowledge and investment and research and development, etc. I know, sort of speaking to Wendy during the pandemic, key for her, as Jane actually mentioned, was recruiting staff, getting staff on the shop floor, managing absence, managing well-being of employees. Actually, the last thing that a lot of businesses want to be doing is thinking about the future of payroll and payroll operations within their own business. And that is, as a payroll company, that is what we do all day, every day. We do think about what the future of payroll may look like, how we support the future workforce, what employees are requesting, what the impacts of well-being will have on payroll technology and payroll operations. So I think sort of on a macro level, that's one of the things. I think on a micro level, in terms of protecting it on a day-to-day basis with a provider, Jane picked up on one of the things that I would say sort of is key to that relationship, which is establishing a relationship and actually putting the effort in to continue to make it work. Having a proper stakeholder which goes across the organisation, and we do sometimes see that once it's implemented and it's working well, some of the investment in that time and that relationship drops off, and actually that's where you need it most to maintain and future-proof that relationship.
Okay, thanks, Mandy. Chris, have you anything to add on that question?
Yeah, I think again, echo the points Mandy made. I think as well, there's a focus on just moving with the times almost. I think that, you know, with this renewed focus on employee well-being, for example, I've even seen, you know, companies started to think about how can payroll support that. And if you think about financial well-being, that, you know, all of the information's there in payroll, and how can we leverage that as a payroll function to support employees. I've mentioned it already, I know, but I think data is a big thing, and data traditionally in payroll there's this huge, you know, volume of data. It's held in, you know, systems, spreadsheets, reports, etc. And very much is how can we support the business in this more agile future that we're seeing, in terms of digging that data out and presenting it in a way that can support everything and all the initiatives that businesses are going to want to run with. Okay, all right, thanks, Chris. Okay, let's kind of move on. So Jane, coming back to you quickly, and I guess, well, I guess it has to be the answer to this one. Is it been more complex and challenging to run your payroll in-house through these remote working times? I mean, it's got to be, right? Yeah. Yeah, it has been complex. You know, everything got complicated, didn't it, overnight? I suppose we have found a way of working, all of us. But it did take a while to settle down. But yes, complexity is hard to deal with through, I dare to say normal times, but normal times, dealing with this level of complexity and things that were thrown at us all very quickly just added to the complexity. And it did take a while for us to work things out. But as Mandy said, the communication and continuing to talk, even if we didn't all have the answers, it was the right thing to do, to continue to talk and find the solutions between us. Yeah, thanks very much, Jane. So let's move on to kind of changes in the workplace. So again, I'll come back to you, Jane, just because it's obviously, you know, from this practitioner point of view, you know, how have you managed the many changes in your workforce along with the required legislative knowledge? So some of these things we're talking about, and I guess we're talking complex days of furlough schemes, contingent workers, 0 hours contracts, redundancies. It's very, very complicated. It is, yeah. I mean, it's important to say that we don't just, when you outsource, you don't outsource all the knowledge as well. So, you know, we do have some experts within my team and within our HR shared service team that, you know, have had experiences at other businesses or have, you know, keep themselves up to date. So we have, you know, policy experts within my team. We were all learning from the government website. It suddenly became our Bible for a few weeks with furlough schemes and the changing definitions. I was on a number of calls with BRC, just making sure that we understood what that meant for us. I mean, just for the record, we didn't take advantage of the furlough scheme. We were quite the opposite. We were taking people on who had been furloughed from other businesses, but actually that was a moot point for a few days because we weren't sure we were allowed to. So, you know, all I would say is that basically we have knowledge within my team, and I ensure that my team are up to speed on all these legislative changes so that we can talk with confidence with SD Worx when we're trying to find solutions, or how do we deliver this? How do we, you know, pay redundancy and make sure it's accurate? We don't also work off 0 hour contracts either, but making sure that we don't, and that we don't have anyone in our system is, again, it's absolutely dependent on us getting that right at ASDA first, and not just relying on our partners to deliver that for us. Yeah, thanks, Jane. And Mandy, I guess you in your company and your team, you've got to keep up with all these changes, and you've got to be.
Yeah, I mean, from legislation and compliance is basically the backbone of our business, and sort of both in the UK, across Europe, and sort of across the globe. The majority of the people that work within our organisation are focused on operational payroll delivery, so that again is their day-to-day job. We have a lot of links with HMRC and with many different organisations too, and we also sort of work with them in terms of advising them from a payroll operational delivery point of view, how some of the changes they make may impact payroll departments and payroll technology. They don't always take our advice on board, obviously, but we do work with them on different boards to ensure and to have that sort of rounded picture as to how to make sure that we are abreast of the latest legislation. We're continually thinking about how our technology and services will support any changes in legislation, and that we can also pass that advice back to HMRC in an operational perspective, because any, as Jane said, any legislation that they publish has to be executed and has to be able to be understood, and then at the end of the day pay people accurately and on time.
Yeah, and I think technology, I mean, technology through all of COVID, let's face it, has been a massive, huge enabler. So again,
and a challenge, as we've seen this morning, that Wendy may or may not be somewhere in the ether in Teams.
Indeed. Yeah, we have Wendy sort of as an attendee, I think. So, again, how do you see that panning out? I mean, technology obviously has caught companies out to some degree. So, being outdated, expensive to keep. So is that the same sense in payroll?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's clear that some organisations didn't have the technology, the infrastructure, or actually the skill set to support that level and scale of change. But I mean, in every area of business, not just payroll technology, I think they've said that something like 10 years of change happened in a month, especially in things like hospitality. And it would have taken years for a lot of the change that has had to happen to actually happen. I mean, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, sort of when I first started working in HR and payroll, it was all about bespoke in technology. That was actually what people wanted. How could we best bespoke the technology to make it individual for your business and work in the best way for the individualities of your business? That isn't the way technology works anymore. Technology is very much about, sort of, as we all know from Apple and sort of iPhones, etc., you want to be able to take advantage of the latest upgrades, the latest technology, the latest changes quickly and easily. And that's only achievable if you're on standard platform and standard tech. But to get from an old bespoke model that was built, I mean, I was involved when we were speaking to Marks and Spencer 10 years ago about their rollout, and iPad didn't even exist during the initial conversations. By the time we actually rolled it out, every shop floor employee needed to be able to access their timesheets on an iPad. So things change all the time. But I think the big push now, I think for me, there's two. One, it's standard technology. So you're able to take advantage of the latest upgrades all the time. And integration now is so advanced that you are able to integrate so many different best of breed technology platforms to provide both the HR and payroll teams with the requirements they need, the employee with the best experience possible, so they don't have to remember 20 different passwords to access everything that they want to. And as Chris said, then the other big thing out the back of that is data and analytics, being able to pull all of your people data out and analyze it all in one place, rather than it taking a month to download 17 spreadsheets and try and cobble them together.
And that's, this is technology has been able to do that, hasn't it? Bring things together. Chris, again, coming back to you as that independent voice, and you touched on it a little bit earlier on, but yeah, insight into what you're seeing out in the marketplace would be interesting, Chris.
Yeah, I think, again, to echo some of Mandy's points, I think there's a real mix of, we've got these old in-house sort of bespoke systems that in some cases have 20-25 years of rules built on top of them, on top and on top and on top again. And there's actually companies, I think, that lean on that and maybe need that, and that's a cultural thing as much as anything. I think in terms of the modern technology and where people are heading for, I think absolutely it's standard tech. Even when we look at some of the huge sort of offerings in terms of combined HCM and payroll offerings, they're all their entire ethos is based on standard, and don't customize this, don't make this really complicated. And I think what what we see is companies with those 25-year-old, bespoke systems who want to move to that. And I think there is an appetite in I would say probably the majority of companies to bring those systems and that technology into the modern sort of environment. But there needs to be that strategic, back to the subject of the webinar, that there needs to be that strategic sort of focus on, well, actually, the reasons that we've got this bespoke tool in the first place, we need to address those, and we need to make sure that we don't have these historic pay agreements, etc., and everything, and all of the complex rules and different rules per, for instance, grade, but for all the different schemes. So I think we see an appetite to move, and I think absolutely that's the future, and that's where we're heading. I think it's how we get there and how we approach that that's the sort of burning issue, and that's why this is such a good sort of topic to be discussing on here today.
Yeah, I think absolutely, we're seeing what's possible now, aren't we? And I think technology is kind of really playing a huge part. So let's move on to our second poll, shall we? So what is the biggest challenge you are currently facing in terms of your payroll? Again, the Q&A will be in the Q&A. The link will be posted for you to click on. Multiple choice. So A, outdated technology. B, lack of complex legislation knowledge. C, cost saving or proving ROI. Or D, improving efficiency or operations. So should see that in the Q&A. Let's if you can have a vote on that one, and then we'll share that back in a moment. And E, well, I forgot E, all of the above. So okay, so we've touched a little bit, but let's talk about risk then, because risk is a big issue here. So much legislation to keep up with. We talked about complexity in today's workforce. And Jane, let me come to you. And I guess, so do you kind of foresee any risk implications with your present payroll function that you have at the moment?
Yeah, I thought Mandy was talking about our bespoke systems at one point there. We do have a very bespoke solution with SD Worx at the moment, and actually you're probably aware that there's been a change of ownership at ASDA in the last few months. So we are going through a huge program of change from a systems perspective in ASDA. And when I say system, I mean every system that we have within ASDA. At the moment, we are on Walmart system still. We are intending to replace our HR system, which then obviously has implications with all the feeds of data that then go to our payroll provider. And this is an ideal opportunity, and we are now talking together with SD Worx about how do we move off our very old bespoke solution that we have with them currently, which has served us well, but actually will not serve as well in the future. So that's and it's actually making sure that we have this program here. We're calling it the Future Program, which actually we're now putting the SD Worx work stream. Actually, we're treating it as one of our major work streams here, because to get that right is absolutely imperative when we introduce our new HR system. So it's a very pertinent point for us at the moment, and one that's got a lot of focus.
Thanks, Jane. So again, remember the Q&A is on that link. We published a link in the Q&A. You should click on and you can do your multiple choice there. So we'll feed that back in. Mandy, coming to you then, and obviously working closely with ASDA there. You've seen all those sorts of issues. So what solutions are there to kind of tackle this?
Yeah, as Jane said, and obviously I am aware of ASDA's situation, and we have other clients in similar situations, and we work with clients who have similar situations sort of with other providers as well. There is no easy fix to move those big old bespoke legacy systems. It is a case of looking at a program of work in terms of technology and process re-engineering changes, and making those changes. From our perspective, that is, and going back to one of the questions from the Q&A earlier, in terms of future-proofing payroll delivery, that will future-proof payroll delivery. Because the other thing about some of those older systems is any changes that needed to be made to those was costly, time-consuming, and impactful on other areas. Again, sort of I talked about integration. Once the integrations are then in place, and that's integrating with other standard technology, and we have certified integrations now with ERPs such as Workday, Oracle, SuccessFactors. So those integrations are certified that updates will be made. And we also have that within our own technology as well. So yeah, definitely from a risk mitigation point of view, it is about sort of that standard process and standard tech, and then working with your provider to ensure that any changes that come in, as Jane mentioned, change of ownership is massive. We have other companies sort of divest and acquire, and again, you're then into the likes of TSAs and transfer agreements, and they again can become costly. So again, it's working with our customers to ensure that we understand the implications of those and understand what success could look like. Yeah, thanks, Mandy. And Chris, coming to you, really, I guess you probably agree with probably all that Mandy said there. But again, what are you seeing innovative solutions for organisations, say, on the right side of the law?
Yeah, I think so. I think broadly, again, it's about bringing payroll, as with any other function, along with the times, if you like. So there's all the historic, when you talk about law and rules and governance, etc. There's all the historic ways. I remember sitting on desks with rafts of textbooks and tax tables and everything on my desk, and that was the only way to sort of do it. I think the modern world has everything at their fingertips, and I think that another knock-on impact of that is it kind of needs to be bite-sized and frequently available. So I think I know there's a payroll podcast out there, for example, an industry-specific one where these things can be discussed and flagged. I think at LACE, I know we focus very much on trying to issue 60-second shorts on specific subjects that HR payroll professionals would be interested in. We issue blogs, webinars such as this one, and our own podcasts. And I think that's really important, because I think yes, the relationships with, for instance, HMRC, with providers, etc. are important, but I think this day and age requires very much that message to be out there and a trigger point and a flag for people. It needs to be freely accessible and in a format that means that it's going to get their attention, if you like. Yeah, okay. And so let's also look at, we mentioned cost savings there. That's one of our poll questions there. So cost savings, let's face it, always top of the agenda, especially in these challenging times. So I guess let's come to you, Jane, again, if I may. You still challenged to make cost savings, efficiency drivers, and also looking at your payroll being more sustainable. Is that something that you're always looking at?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and it's not just from the provider side, but actually from obviously we send over our gross information to SD Worx, but actually getting it to that point, how do we automate quite a lot of our processes at our side as well? And obviously we'll challenge SD Worx where they can to simplify processes where possible, and therefore the bottom line is that will reduce costs for us and for SD Worx. So yeah, we are challenged with that. The new technology that we'll be looking at, that's one thing we'll be focusing on. Simplicity, as Chris mentioned before, not having 10 different ways of doing something when actually one will do. But over the years, you tend to with bespoke solutions, you sit back and look and you realise that you've got, you're doing the same thing but in 10 different ways. So we are challenging ourselves through this big piece of change to simplify as well, which ultimately will mean cost savings.
Yeah, thanks, Jane. It's a shame we haven't been able to get Wendy in, because I know she's listening away at the moment, but she's obviously newish into outsourcing payroll. So hopefully we can feed some of that back to you after this event. Poll results then, let's just take a quick look then. So poll results are, well, the winner here is all of the above. So, obviously all of the above is the clear winner at 67%. Second, improving efficiency or operations, joint with lack of complex legislation knowledge, and 0 for outdated technology and 0 for ROI. So yeah, again, Mandy, just any comments on that? So it's literally seems like all of those issues are big.
Definitely, and I know Wendy frustratingly is listening and isn't able to speak because she has texted me. So to speak on her behalf, sort of definitely all of those came into play. when Bestway were outsourcing their payroll. And you know, as I've said before, outsourcing isn't necessarily right for everybody, and sometimes I know sort of one of the things that people look to SD Worx for is the fact that we can flex between an in-house model and an outsourced model, because things can change. And sort of Wendy and the team did very much consider selecting the right provider, and that had those two options. And it wasn't until right sort of towards the end of the selection process, when we were about to sign the contract actually, that she decided to take all of those payrolls outsourced. So I think sort of definitely all of those areas come into play, and even if they don't at the beginning, throughout the lifetime of looking at payroll. And that's the other thing about outsourcing your payroll and not outsourcing your payroll, it's not necessarily a decision for life. And it does need to be looked at repeatedly to see if it is still the right delivery model for your organisation.
Yeah, yeah. And Jane, again, just coming back to you, I guess through these challenging times, you know, what sort of advantages have you seen? And can you, do you or can you apply a metric to ROI, in terms of your payroll sort of outsourcing?
We don't apply a specific metric. I mean, we challenge SD Worx, they challenge themselves to hit certain SLAs, and we do the same with our HR shared service. So do I think now, would I want to start insourcing? I think if you've asked the opposite question, I think my answer would be no. Currently, that would be a massive undertaking for a business of our size at a time of such great change as well. So every time we come to talk contracts with our partners, then obviously we put metrics to that, and we have internal metrics of what we believe we should put against our relationship, and do we still think outsourcing is the right answer? And I think if you asked anybody, even in the finance team, I think they would say yes, that is the right answer currently for us.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Sue. And Mandy, coming back to you quickly, I know obviously with Wendy, and obviously you'll know a little bit about her story with outsourcing her payroll, but is there anything that you can sort of share with us that in terms of advantages that Wendy and Bestway have seen?
Oh, I mean, it actually sort of they fully went live this week, so they will sort of now see the benefit of being off all of their legacy technologies, and because there were a number of different elements to the Bestway solution, if you like, from an SD Worx point of view, the return on investment, I'm sure, is different for each area. There was a very stringent business case that went back and forth for quite a long time, and I know sort of a lot of that is internal from Bestway's perspective, but there were some very strict metrics from their point of view, from a return on investment to outsource, and that also then comes back to the strategical and tactical decision. It's much easier, I think, to put the return on investment for outsourcing from a tactical perspective down on paper, because you can look at how many people you've got now, what their salaries are, what your tech costs are, and what that will be moving forward. It's more difficult to put a metric around strategic administrative processes, efficiency gains, the cost of keeping up to date with legislation, the cost of a better employee experience, and the value of a better employee experience. They are more difficult to define from a return on investment point of view. Yeah, no, and ROI is an interesting one, because we look at ROI on a number of different areas, not just payroll, and sometimes there's clear kind of ROI, other times there's some hidden return on investment, isn't there? Okay, so I guess really looking at the next question, we're sort of nearly coming to the end, so our last question for the panel, and this is looking at, I guess, at the needs of the business, because ultimately, they're very different today from what they have been in the past, and we've got huge amounts of changes in terms of how our workforce is managed. So, Chris, if I could turn to you, we've got this whole thing now, and these keywords which are quite true: transform,
agility, resilience, and sustainability. I mean, these are all things that and purpose that people, companies and organisations are having to look at. So how do you see, payroll functions sort of supporting these drives as we go forward?
I think, again, and I've mentioned it a few times and it's come up, I know with some of the points Mandy's made, but I think data is really huge here. And I think it's, as I said, traditionally payroll's been this, sort of back office function with a lot of data held within systems and spreadsheets and what have you. And I think that's changing. And I think the reality is businesses are relying very heavily on, with all these, sustainability drives, well-being, etc. And I think payroll is the one function and the one place where all of this information sits and is held. It's the one place that has all of it. So I think that really is key, and I can't emphasize enough how much the transformation of bringing that to the surface and payroll supporting the business in that sort of capacity really is. I think other points, things like benefits, I know that this isn't always falling within the payroll bracket, but benefits need to be focused on, for instance, the sustainability. We also see companies starting to introduce into sort of performance objectives, etc. People attract on sustainability goals, etc. So yeah, I think that's my sort of, in a nutshell. I think again, data. Yeah.
I mean, data. I think we're at this time where data, as you say, legacy systems trying to put it all together, but data, I think we're working out, can be incredibly predictive and proactive. So, I think it's good to see data really being explored, and I think you're right, it's in the right place, isn't it? Within payroll, and also this idea of, how you use data with your customers. So let's use it with our employees as well. And Jane, I guess just for you, really coming to you, somebody who's sort of, I guess, lived and breathed, outsourcing your purpose so long. I guess are you in good shape to be reactive to this sort of change? And what do you see the future of payroll looking like, and what would you want it to look like? I guess.
Yeah, I think we are in good shape, and as I've mentioned, we're going to go through a huge piece of transformation as a business, and we think particularly about our HR systems, and then making sure that we're on the best solution with SD Worx as well. I think we're well positioned for that. Agility and moving quickly is absolutely at the forefront of retail as well. So from our normal business is constantly changing, which ultimately then means we need to change our ways of working and speed and making sure that we're up to date, etc. So I do think we're in good shape. I personally would not want to be in a different position. I would want to be in an outsourced position in the stage that we're at through our sort of change, with the change of ownership. Even if it's someone to share some of the problems with and solutions, and have somebody else who can actually work with us, which I think is very healthy, rather than just us trying to internally come up with the right solution. So yeah, from my point of view, lived and breathed it for certainly 19 years of my 25 years at ASDA. So yeah, I'm a big believer in that we're very well positioned.
Yeah, and sometimes someone looking in, from a different perspective, you can really get a different gain so much more from it, can't you? And Mandy, obviously you're totally aware of this transformation, agility, resilience. So critical for your organisation also to be able to kind of support this, isn't it, in terms of what companies.
Without a doubt, Jane mentioned sort of the agility that are required. I think sort of businesses and workforces demand agility and flexibility. I mean, even if we look at our own retail clients over the last 5 years, or even if sort of the pandemic has escalated it even more, a lot of those businesses now are as much a tech and distribution business as they are a high street retailer. And that brings a totally different demand on the workforce, on HR, on payroll, and on the technology and services that we provide. So it's up to us as a provider to not just look at our own business and our own industry, but to look at the industries of those customers that we serve and the changes that we see there, and reflect that with innovative solutions, services and technologies that we provide. I mean, underpinning payroll is always accurately on time and compliant. You know, sort of you don't really get away from that, and however much innovation you have, you know, that is the fundamental bedrock of payroll. But I think sort of definitely the key things for moving forward are that data and insight and innovation piece around that.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I mean, it's a very complex area. There's certainly I take my hat off to you all, really. But just a quick one. So just let's do our final poll. Again, this will be posted in the Q&A again. Will you be considering payroll outsourcing? So A, yes, we already have a review transformation project in flight. B, yes, we are due to kickstart review transformation this year. No, but this webinar has made me think that we need to, or no. So if you can just have a go at that one, it's posted in our Q&A again. And then finally, really, I guess to sum up then, just really panel, just final thoughts really. You know, it's all about advice and help, how best to approach your payroll function, and ultimately, you know, should it be a tactical or strategic move or a combination of both? And so let's start with you, Chris, if I could, if you could just give us your thoughts on just a summary, really.
Yep, no problem. I think that for me, it's a bit of both. I know that was reflected earlier in the poll. I think what I would say is sometimes tactical is unavoidable, but it should never be done, if it needs to be, at the expense of a strategy. I think it's important that if you do put tactical fixes in, they're not, you know, contradicting a wider strategy. Without any immediate tactical requirement, though, I would always suggest set it out as a full strategy, and wider than just payroll as well.
Yeah, and I get Jane, just from your sort of more practitioner point of view, just, you know, and again, the experience that you had over the years, just your little sum up there and advice for the audience.
Yeah, I would agree with Chris. I was born out of strategic thinking, and that has continued. Yes, there'll be some tactical side to that as well, but I think you do need to make sure that you've thought about this from a strategic point of view. The things I would encourage people to think about is think long term. Also think about this as a partnership, and as the outsourcing business that you're using being an extension of your own team. That would be my final advice.
Yeah, thanks, Jane. And Mandy, just for you to just conclude there.
Yeah, without repeating anything sort of that Chris and Jane have said, because I agree sort of wholeheartedly with those. I think you know, to build on what Jane said, it's not a decision that you make and put in a drawer and move on. You need to keep revisiting that decision, and also revisiting the relationship that you've got with your provider as to how it can improve, how it can change, how it needs to change to reflect your own business. So, you know, it's not a one-off decision. I think you need to keep revisiting the decision and making sure that that partnership is working well for your organisation.
Yeah, right. And let's just feed in the poll results there. So yeah, 0% actually are already reviewing a transformation project in flight, so the 0% there. 17% due to kickstart one this year. 17% also has made me think about, so no, but made me think that we need to, and 67% no. So this gives us a flavour on the polls there. So, you know, it's can appear to be quite daunting, but it does seem there's a huge amount of help there and expertise, you know, when you need it. So, you know, that's good to see. I think we're pretty much running out of time. I don't know if there's any other questions from anyone else, you know, watching. So please do share any questions right now, and we'll squeeze those in if we can. Failing that, you know, by all means, drop us, you know, we'll drop them in, and we'll come back to you afterwards if we can. So really, we're kind of at the end. You know, we hope you found it useful, insightful, and informative, and provided you hopefully with some answers to enable you to make some decisions on if, you know, outsourcing your payroll is right for your organisation. Thank you to my speakers. I'm really sorry that we couldn't get Wendy involved today, because that would have been really good. But yeah, thanks Jane, thanks Wendy anyway, thanks Mandy, and thanks Chris for their excellent insights and knowledge. And there's no substitute, I never, you know, think for case studies and you know, is there? I think really that's it from us. So thank you very much for your time.
Thanks everybody.
Thank you.